Hello, welcome to A Peek Inside, and my name is Darlene, and we are officially in the Burr months, September all the way to December. It really is my favorite time of the year, and I have been wanting to get back to sharing dinner videos with all of you, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do today. I just filmed our dinners for a week, trying new recipes, using some old recipes that I love, and also figuring out how I can use leftovers and reduce food waste. So I hope that you enjoy. As always, comment down below. Please let me know what you want to see more of, and I really hope you enjoy a little peek into some of the dinners that we enjoyed this week. HelloFresh is a service I use every now and again whenever I get into a meal rut and whenever I have a coupon code. But the great thing about cooking is that you don't need to stick to a recipe like you do for baking. And that's one of the things I want to share with you, is how I will take a recipe, make it work for me, use leftovers, and still come up with something to make for dinner. For this here, I'm using 1 pound of ground chicken. You could use turkey or ground beef, but for this recipe, it is 1 pound of meat. So I'm just seasoning it with a little bit of salt and pepper and garlic powder, and then I'm just using what the vegetables I have. I have some green onions, so I'm going to cut up the whites of them and use them, and then I'm going to save the greens for garnish. And peppers is a vegetable I usually like to have. I find you can always make something with it. You can do omelets, you can do stir fry, you can add it to any kind of meal, and I just find it's one of those vegetables that's very versatile whenever you're going to make dinner. So I'm just going to go ahead and dice them up, and then I'm going to add them to the ground chicken. I will link the recipe down below. It is turkey chili and roasted potato hash bowls. And since I'm using ground chicken, I find it doesn't have the same flavor because it doesn't have the fat content as ground beef. So I'm going ahead and adding in 1.5 tablespoons of chili powder. The recipe doesn't call for it, but I find that it needs a little bit more flavor. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in the vegetables. You could add in some tomatoes if you had them in the back of your fridge and you forgot about them. You could add more onions, you could add celery, you could add mushrooms, you could cut up some carrots, saute them a little bit, celery. You can really use whatever vegetable you have and whatever your family likes. So I cooked that for a little bit. You can see there's a little bit of liquid down in the bottom from the peppers. And then I have a couple of packets left over from a couple of recipes that I made. So this here is 2 tablespoons of Tex-Mex paste. Now what you could do is you could take the 2 tablespoons of tomato paste and add the chili powder in here, or you could add a Tex-Mex seasoning. It's really about using what you have. And I'm just cleaning out some ingredients that I didn't use. And then you're also going to add 4 tablespoons of tomato sauce base. It's a little bit thicker than tomato sauce, but you could go ahead and just add a little bit of tomato sauce. And then to this, I'm going to be adding a cup of water. Now, the reason I'm adding in the cup of water because it is a tomato sauce base. So you could definitely just add in a can of diced tomatoes. You could add in a little bit of tomato sauce. Just kind of don't add too much because you don't want it to be too liquidy. It's always better to be on the side of caution and have less liquid and add more if you need it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this come to a boil for a few minutes and then let it simmer, and then that way everything will absorb the flavor. And this is just a very quick, easy little chili. I have everything off. It is 4:25 p.m. and I usually aim to have dinner on the table for 5:30. Now we're preparing the potatoes. I never thought of putting chili on potatoes until I saw this recipe from HelloFresh. And honestly, I think it's the way that I prefer to have chili, because I always found it was so much to have like kind of a big bowl of chili, and then I always like to have it with bread. And then lots of times I would end up eating more bread than what I needed to, because I like that ratio of chili to bread. And I really think that serving it on potatoes is a great way to use less meat. And then if you buy potatoes on sale, you have potatoes left over. It's a great way to stretch your dollar too. I just buy the small ones. I find they are very convenient. I don't have to scrub and peel them. I just quickly wash them, cut them up, and then I season them with a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper. And I'm going to use my air fryer. You could use sweet potatoes. If you had extra mashed potatoes, you could heat them up and then serve them with the chili on top. It's really about using what you have, and if you have any leftovers, it's a great way to use up those items, because with the price of groceries, you really don't want to waste anything. So 25 minutes in the air fryer. I'm happy with the liquid being absorbed with the chili. I'm just going to heat it up. It's a little after 5. I actually vlogged this day. I will link it down below. I made a nice dessert for us to enjoy. And I like to try and clean up as I go. I have the bowls ready to go. I know that I am going to have leftovers. And then I have my little garnishes to go on top already. So I'm really just waiting for the potatoes to finish up for dinner. This is my favorite part of cooking, is plating it up and doing something to fancy it up for presentation. These are plate bowls that I got at IKEA. I love them. So I'm just putting the potatoes in the bottom of the bowl, and then I'm going to go ahead and put them in my container that's already out. So this helps with making cleanup a little bit easier. And I just find whenever my kitchen is organized and everything is cleaned up and I have everything out and ready to go, it really helps me. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring the skillet over. It's very heavy, and I'm just going to put the chili on top. So about a scoop on top of it, and then we're just going to put the rest of it into the container. And for our son has autism. He has some sensory issues and texture issues. There's a lot of foods that he doesn't like, but he's come a long way, and I never would have thought he would eat chili and potatoes, and here we are. So this is what it looks like. And I take a little bit of sour cream, put a little bit of shredded cheese, the greens of the onions on top, and I feel like it just brings it up a notch. And you put that time and effort into cooking, and if you can make it look a little bit nicer, I think it's worth the time. I am trying a new recipe tonight, apple cider glazed pork tenderloin. I made an apple cider spice cake and it was really good, and I did a Google search to find something with apple cider and pork. I came across this recipe. It had great reviews. Now it calls for alcoholic cider. I didn't have that. I'm using the cider that I have. I also didn't have a bay leaf, so I'm going to use some oregano and thyme, garlic, brown sugar, some honey, and some salt and pepper. This is a marinade. It said to marinate it for 24 hours, but I'm marinating it early in the morning. So I just mixed it all up. I just used the 1 cup of apple cider, and then I just have it in the Ziploc bag, and I'm going to let it sit in the refrigerator all day. So this recipe will be linked down below, and it also has notes on different things that you can do and some of the recommendations. It's many hours later, and originally I was going to do mashed potatoes and carrots to go along with this. I thought it would make a nice gravy to go on the potatoes, but I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, so I'm just going to go ahead and do roasted vegetables. I have my oven preheating to 425 degrees, and I also have some vegetables to clean up. I have 2 sweet potatoes that I peeled. I'm just going to dice them up, an orange and a yellow bell pepper, a little bit of red onion. I also have some mushrooms that I'm going to add to this, and I also have an apple. And that's the great thing about roasting vegetables. You can use whatever you have, and if some of the vegetables take a little bit longer to cook than others, just make sure that you cut them up a little bit smaller. So what I'm going to do is just add everything into this pan. I'm going to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil, and just use my salt and my pepper and a little bit of sage. And then I also have a little bit of balsamic glaze. I prefer this than the vinegar. I get it at Costco. And then I realized that my dish that I started off with was just a little bit too small and I wanted everything to be in a single layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it all on a cookie sheet, and then I'm going to put it in the oven and roast it for about 30 minutes. Before I started chopping the vegetables, I took the pork tenderloin out so it could get to room temperature, and I cooked the vegetables for half an hour. I'm just making sure that they're not sticking to the pan, and they're not. And I'm going to go ahead and cover this up with tin foil to keep them warm, because I'm going to be cooking the pork tenderloin in the oven at a lower temperature. I also have a fan going, so I put a towel on just to make sure that the tin foil didn't blow away. Now I have 1 tablespoon of olive oil in my pan here, and my pan wasn't as hot as it should have been, and I didn't get the really nice sear on the pork tenderloin. But all you're going to do is just sear it until it's golden brown all over. It says don't let it burn. And then you're going to put it in the 350-degree oven, and it says to roast for 15 to 20 minutes. So our son, this is one of those meals that he is not going to like. So I have the leftovers from the night before. I just mix them up and I'm heating them up on the skillet. So it has been 20 minutes and I'm going to get my meat thermometer out, and it says to make sure that it has an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. If you do not have a meat thermometer, this is one of those things that I highly recommend having in your kitchen. It just takes all of the guesswork out and you know exactly what the internal temperature is. So it's at the right temperature, and then I'm going to remove it from the skillet, and then I'm going to put it on a plate and then just cover it with tin foil because I'm going to be making a sauce. Now my oven is turned off, but I'm putting in the pan of vegetables just to make sure that it stays nice and warm. I have my pan on high heat and I'm adding 1.5 tablespoons of butter, and I'm going to melt it, and it's going to get all of that flavor at the bottom of the pan. Now there's 3 little spots up at the top that you can see that I really don't want to be in the sauce for the pork tenderloin because they're a little burnt, but they just easily scraped off. And now I'm going to go ahead and take my whisk and move the butter all around the pan, loosening everything up. And this is going to be a good base because we're going to go ahead and take that marinade that the tenderloin sat in all day. And then we're also going to add in 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard. And then we're going to whisk it all in, make sure that the mustard works in with everything else. And then we are going to bring it to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, you turn the heat down, and then it says to simmer very rapidly and cook until the liquid becomes syrupy, about 4 to 5 minutes. I set my timer for 5 minutes. Now, whenever it has the note here, it tells you what to do for non-alcoholic cider, and it says to use a cup of apple juice, but then another 1/4 cup of chicken broth. I only used 1 cup of the apple cider, and I'm glad that I did because I think if I would have used any more liquid, I don't think it would have thickened up as nicely as it did. And it said to roll the pork around in the sauce. I'm just going to go ahead and take my spoon and ladle it on top, and I do want to give it a little bit of a taste. It was delicious, and then it said you could adjust your seasonings. I didn't think it needed anything. And I really wish that I would have went ahead with the mashed potatoes and carrots. I think it would have made a really nice dinner. But I'm just going to go ahead and slice up the pork, and then I'm just going to plate it with the vegetables, and then just take that nice flavorful sauce and then just pour it over. Now, this was a really simple dinner to make, and one of the comments was that it was restaurant worthy. I would definitely make this to serve because you can go ahead and prep it in the morning. It doesn't take long to cook, and the flavor of the sauce is just something I've never made before. And it just felt like you were really making something that you would get in a restaurant. And I really love the deep color. I really didn't know what was going to happen, so I'm just going to ladle this around. Like I said, if I would have used any more liquid, I think it would have been a little bit too watery. And I think the next time I make it, I'm actually going to try it with the alcohol cider. But anyways, this was the finished product. It was really good. And we just had this, and we had another slice of the apple spice cake, and it was delicious. And of course, there is going to be leftovers. So I went ahead and I took all of the pork tenderloin and I cut it up. I put the vegetables in here, and then I drizzled the rest of the sauce over. So as it sits, it's going to absorb all of that flavor, and I'm going to use it for dinner another night later this week. It's Monday, and I thought I would make a meatless meal, and I knew what ingredients I had. I knew I wanted to make a one-pot dinner, and I really didn't know what I was going to make. I went to Google, did some searching, and I found this one-pot Mexican taco pasta. It's actually a vegan recipe, but I'm going to make it work for me. So I have a can of tomatoes, black beans, tomato paste. I'm using chicken broth instead of vegetable broth. You could omit this, or you could even do ground beef if you wanted to, but it called for a minced meat alternative. I had some black bean burgers, thought I would use them up. Macaroni, it called for carrots. I'm using peppers, frozen corn. You can use canned corn if you have it. I'm using green onions, garlic, salt and pepper, chili powder, and it called for smoked paprika, but I don't love smoked paprika. I'm just going to use taco seasoning, and then it called for 1 teaspoon of raw cane sugar. I'm just going to go ahead and use white sugar. So I've never made this before, and there was one little tip that you could do to make it a one-pot dinner. So a little bit of olive oil, then I'm adding in my green onions, saute it for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to add my garlic. Always be careful with garlic because it can burn so quickly. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add in the peppers. And what I did was I took the 2 black bean burgers and just cut them up, and I'm going to add them in here. Like I said, if you could have a pound of ground beef, ground turkey, leftovers, you could throw it in here. Taco meat, if you had leftovers. So I'm just going to saute this around for a few more minutes. And this recipe was great because it really didn't take that long to cook. And as this was cooking for a little bit, I moved everything over to my stovetop just to make it a little bit easier. So I'm adding in the salt and the pepper, and then I added a little bit more seasoning than what it called for. It called for a teaspoon of each. I probably did about a teaspoon and a half, 2 teaspoons of the chili powder. And then I'm just going to keep adding everything in. The only thing I was a little bit concerned about was that I didn't have the exact size of cans, what the recipe called for. So it said 14-ounce can of chopped tomatoes. I think mine was 18 and a half, and same with the beans. It was just whatever I had. And I do find that sometimes with the recipes that you find, because groceries are getting smaller, sometimes, the cans or the jars of sauce are a little bit different. So sometimes you have to tweak a few little things. And that was the only thing I was kind of worried about, was because this was a one-pot dinner. So I was kind of worried if it was going to be too much liquid for the macaroni. And then it called for a tablespoon of tomato paste. I put about a tablespoon and a half in. I love tomato paste. I find it enhances the flavor. It can thicken up the sauce. A little goes a long way, but I did about 1.5 tablespoons. And then the recipe said to use 1 cup of broth. And then if you want to add the pasta in, to add a cup of water. I just went ahead and added another cup of the broth. And it said that you could cook the pasta separately and then add it in. But I find that when you cook the pasta in with everything else, it just gives it so much flavor because it's going to absorb all the spices. It's going to cook in with the tomatoes. And I just think it adds a lot more flavor. Plus, it's one less dish to wash. So I'm keeping the seasoning out because I didn't know if I was going to need to add any more because I really wasn't sure about it, because I also added the black bean burgers and they had a little bit of seasoning in too. So it said to let it simmer until the pasta is al dente, 8 to 10 minutes. I set my timer for 10 minutes. And then it also says if the sauce gets too thick, you can add more water. So once again, I was cleaning up, the dishwasher's actually running. And then I realized that I wasn't supposed to add the beans and corns until the end. But I'm glad that I added them when I did because they're absorbing all the flavor too. So the tomato paste, I put it in a container and I'm going to put it in the freezer because I'll need it again. And then the chicken broth, I'm going to use it for another dinner. And then I have my toppings out, some green onions, the tops, and then sour cream, and then the Mexican cheese. So after the 10 minutes, I was pretty happy with it. It seemed to be thickening up really good, and I just wanted to taste it just to see what the flavor was. It was perfect. I didn't need to add anything else to it. So I went ahead, put all of my spices away, and let it finish cooking for the 10 minutes. I'm going to get dinner plated up. I have a couple of containers out for leftovers. And would I make this recipe again? I'm not sure, but it was what I needed on this night. I wanted to make a one-pot dinner. I was looking for a meatless meal, and then when I saw this recipe, I had those black bean burgers. I originally bought them thinking I would have them for lunch. I never did. And it was a good way to use them up. It was a dinner that everybody ate. There's some leftovers. It was really simple to make and it was quick. And it was a pretty easy cleanup, but everybody ate it. It was really good. I wish I would have had some tortilla chips to go along with it because I think it would have added something extra to it. Like I just felt like we were eating this bowl, but it was very flavorful and it was very easy to make. It is leftover night. Our son's going to have the pasta dish from the night before. And then my husband and I are going to have the pork tenderloin and the roasted vegetables. And I'm going to take the rest of the chicken broth and I'm going to use it to make rice. And then we're going to put the pork and the vegetables on top of the rice. So I had exactly 2 cups of broth left, which was perfect because I'm going to add in 1 cup of this Thai jasmine rice. It's just the Great Value brand from Walmart. This is my favorite rice. I just don't really care for the basmati rice and I prefer to have jasmine rice in my pantry. So once the broth comes to a boil, I'm going to stir in 1 cup, let it cook for the 12-14 minutes, ready to go. And then I just heat everything on the stovetop in my frying pans. And then once it starts to simmer a little bit, I just add a little bit of water just so it doesn't dry out. And then it will also help with the sauce for a little bit for our dishes. And especially for us, I really wanted to kind of get a little bit more of that sauce from the pork tenderloin. And I thought it'd be really nice served over the rice. I know some people don't like leftovers, but I do. I know that we're going to get a home cooked meal. I know that we're using up the items that we have. We're only a family of 3 and there's always extras left. And this is what it looks like. Our son really loved this. I put a little bit of balsamic glaze on mine. My husband doesn't really care for it, so he just left his alone. But it was really good. I wish there would have been a little bit more sauce, but it was a quick, easy dinner, and I even have rice left over, so I am going to use that for another night's dinner. So we cleaned up the leftovers, and then I also have a little bit left over to help with another dinner. I tried a couple of new recipes. We had leftovers. Now I'm making something that I have been making for years. Sandy Richard, she hosted this show called Fixing Dinner. I watched it, and this is one of the recipes that I have made for years. Then I was in at the thrift store, and I came across this cookbook, and there was the recipe in here. Very simple. I've made it a lot over the years, but it's 6:30 in the morning. Tablespoon of paprika, 1/4 cup of honey, 2 tablespoons of sesame oil, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, and a tablespoon of lime juice. And you also need an egg. You just beat it all up and then you put in your skinless, boneless chicken thighs. I've also done it with chicken breasts, and then I'm just going to put the lid on, put it in the fridge, and I don't need to worry about it until dinner time tonight. My husband is going to barbecue the chicken tonight, and I'm going to do the sides. So I'm going to do these pot stickers. Last time I used this Japanese barbecue sauce, and it turned out really good. And I have some frozen vegetables, and I'm just going to make a quick fried rice with the leftovers from the night before. Now, I was planning on making a chicken sandwich for our son, but there was still a pasta dish left over, so he had that. He loved it. And I just have the vegetables here, and I have the pot stickers with a little bit of oil. And last time I cooked them according to the instructions, and then I added in the Japanese barbecue sauce later, and they turned out really good. This time I did it different, and I wish I would have done it the way I did last time. So I'm just adding in the rice, and then I'm just going to do soy sauce. I'm not adding in an egg or anything. So I should have put all of the water that was in on the instructions, but I went ahead and added in the barbecue sauce, and it needed more water to steam them. And I'm just keeping it really simple with the rice. I don't have a lot of vegetables left. I really need to get some groceries, but I'm working with what I have. And honestly, I didn't even feel like cooking dinner. It was really hot and humid. We have the air conditioning going, and I am ready for sweater weather, but we got to have dinner. So anyways, everything came together, but it did not plate up as nicely as I thought it was going to. And the sauce was a little bit too thick on the pot stickers. They didn't turn out as nice as last time, but dinner was really good. We were hungry. Everybody was able to get something they like to eat. And most important, there's chicken left over for the next night. Now, this is the last dinner, and I wasn't even going to show it to you, but I'm going to keep it real. We have chicken, we have some tortillas left. I'm going to do ranch. I did get some lettuce because I got cauliflower, and I decided to get the lettuce because we were having sandwiches. I have a $2 mac and cheese that I got on sale, and then we're going to munch on the grapes. And, you know, it's the end of the week. I need to get groceries, and everybody needs to eat. So I just preheat the oven, and then I turn it off, and then I put the tortillas in. I'm waiting for the water to boil, and then I cut the chicken, and then as it cooks, I'm just going to add a little bit of water so it doesn't dry out. It worked out perfect, and I'm just going to work with what we have. And that's the thing. It's about getting dinner on the table. It doesn't have to be perfect every night. I started off really strong. I got in meal ruts, and then I was kind of over like barbecue. I was ready to make soups and stews, and then the weather had cooled down, and then it warmed up again. But I'm just doing the best that I can. I'm cleaning up the last of the tortillas. We had the chicken left over, and there's nothing wrong with using some boxed ingredients every once in a while. And honestly, my husband was like, oh, like he was kind of surprised, and it was simple. Everybody liked it. It cleaned up some stuff, and I got dinner on the table. Wasn't the greatest meal? No. But it was something that everybody ate, and I was very thankful that we were able to enjoy a nice dinner and sit down and eat it as a family. I hope you enjoyed seeing what we had for dinners this week. I think this one was my favorite. I really did like the pork tenderloin. The sauce was the star of the dish. I will be making this again. I think it would be really good with mashed potatoes. I tried a new dish. I used up some ingredients. It was exactly what we needed on this night, and then we had leftovers. It gives me a break from cooking, but we still get a home-cooked meal. We were able to use the barbecue on a really hot night. The pot stickers didn't turn out great, but it was still a really good dinner. And then our last dinner was just a real simple dinner. Everybody ate it. There's no leftovers. It cleaned up a lot of things. So I hope that you enjoyed seeing a week of our dinners. It's not something I'm going to do every week. I'm hoping to do one of these videos once a month, but I will be back with more dinner ideas, and I will be making some soup recipes soon. So like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more.